Welcome to Rich Step Podcast, where we discuss entrepreneurship, industry trends, and the occasional book review. Did you know Instacart's AI pricing experiments might be costing families over $1,200 a year? Today, we're going to discuss why Silicon Valley needs to stop building extractive algorithms and start choosing good quests with Andy Elwood, founder of Stretch. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Andy, when we had our intro call a couple weeks ago, you talked about a couple topics, but one that caught my eye was this article from Founders Fund. But before we jump into that, do you want to just provide a little bit background on how you got where you are right now? This is not your first rodeo. The stretches stretches not necessarily 0 to 1, but maybe 0 to like 4.
It's fair to say. Yeah, no, having the chance to be a founder again is always a privilege. Having the chance to be a founder again and finish what you started is an absolute privilege. And that's how I feel every day when I wake up and start working on Stretch, because I started thinking about this problem of price and transparency for groceries in 2013 and went on and built a company that was called Basket.com. We raised $20 million of venture capital. We had 650,000 families that we were helping. We had crowdsourced 118,000 grocery stores with 2 million products in our database. And unfortunately, we were a victim of the pandemic and a couple other tragic things that we can jump into if you want to. But all in all, we were right, but we were early. And a lot of the things that happened during the pandemic and the way that pricing got recalibrated at grocery stores to allow for curbside pickup or for delivery reopened this opportunity. And I met and decided to partner with somebody who's been building in the grocery space for a long time. And when we looked at the opportunity, I said, I saw this opportunity in 2013, but then in 2025, the opportunity was just glaring me in the face that it was still there and maybe even a better opportunity. So super proud to be building what we're building and excited for all that comes next.
Yeah, and especially the whole Instacart scandal that we'll get into a little bit later in the episode really puts your company in the limelight for sure.
It was. I've never had more people reach out to me about a single article. When that headline came out, it was my every inbox that I have. My phone, my messages, my DMs was, Andy, did you see this? And I saw it and said, we're doing the right work here.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we'll dive into it, but the article definitely is bonkers for sure. But so in this episode, we're just going to highlight the Founders Fund article. We're going to be discussing this Instacart AI pricing scandal, and then we're going to be talking about the solution that Andy Elwood's company Stretch provides. And that's going to be it. So before we do any of that, I'm Dalton Anderson. This is Andy Elwood from Stretch, and we're going to jump into this article from Founders Fund, and it's really about the philosophy of like what is a good quest. And there's a matrix of these quests, and there's good hard quests, there's hard quests, or there's bad hard quests, there's good hard quests, and then there's easy, and then there are bad easy. And basically, in a general sense, is like you want to focus a lot of your resources and talents on good hard quests because they add a lot of value to society. And then you never want to focus any of your talent, or you definitely don't want society moving towards bad hard quests. Like an example on the matrix of bad hard quests would be like genocide, which no one wants that. So that's definitely not something that we're striving for. And a good hard quest would be like the Apollo program or a full body scan diagnostic for cancer. And then the list goes on, but it really is something that you really resonated. It resonated with myself when you talked about it, but it also resonated with you and was one of your cornerstones on Stretch. So you want to dive in a little bit about your feelings about what is a good quest, and do you think that the best and brightest are working on these good hard quests?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when I was presented with the opportunity to jump back into the founder seat, I initially rejected that opportunity. I had a lot of things going on. I had still had PTSD from the last time and the way it went down, when my last company finished. And also, my mom wasn't doing so well health wise, and my wife was pregnant. And I was like, you know what? This is not a good year to start a new company. I know what that's like. I know what it's like to start a new company. This is the fifth company that I've been a part of launching, and I knew what it would take, and I knew what it was asking of me to do it. And so I initially just kind of said, not this year. I'll support the founder. I'll support somebody who wants to tackle this, but not me. And when I had left my last company, I knew that eventually I was going to want to be a founder again. Like, if you're a founder, you just kind of it gets in your blood. And there's very few things in this world that are as exciting as going from an idea to literally seeing people walk into your office that believe in this idea so much that they were willing to quit their comfy jobs at Meta to come be a part of your team. It's an incredible experience, and I've done it a few times, and I knew what it would be like to do it again. But I put together 4 non-negotiables back in 2020 as my last company was winding down. And I said, I'm never going to be a founder again unless all 4 of these things are true at the same time. And from 2020 to 2025, it helped me not just go found another company for the sake of founding another company. They were a high enough barrier of entry. And one of the one that probably disqualified the most opportunities that came my direction, especially in the age of vibe coding, especially in the age of transient software, where if you decided to this weekend, we could launch a company and get our first client on Monday. The thing that kept me from doing any of those things was one of my non-negotiables for ever being a founder again was it had to be a 10-year problem. I had to believe that I wanted to think about, talk about it, and obsess about solving a problem for a decade if I was going to begin to work on any of the problems. And with that comes, especially right now, the true understanding that the solution to the problem that I'm setting out to work on for the next 10 years doesn't exist yet. And the software or the platform to make it exist actually might not even exist yet. But directionally, I know I understand the problem enough to know it's not something that I'm just going to be able to figure out with some smart people in 2 years. And so that was kind of like the big thing. And so, so I worked on some climate tech projects, which I'm super proud of the work that we did there, but I never went all in on any one in particular. And so when the opportunity was presented to me to think about what we're building with grocery, what we're building with Stretch around the grocery industry, and I started to think about the 650,000 families that we'd helped with basket.com. I'm a big journaler, and I went back and I reread some of my journals, and I was looking at some of the families who like literally send me Christmas cards still. Like when I announced that my wife and I were pregnant, like they were in my Facebook comments, like saying, hey, it's so great to see you've got a family of your own now. Like these are people who like I genuinely built a relationship with because we were saving them thousands of dollars a year on groceries by providing price and transparency for groceries in the same way that Expedia does for travel or Zillow does for homes. And I thought about it and I was like, okay, well, the data is different, but the problem's the same. But with the data being different, things that changed during the pandemic around the way that the data was structured, I started to explore, I started to scratch the itch a little bit more. And then I was like, oh man, not only is this a 10-year problem, not only is this something that I would want to talk about for 10 years, I've already been talking about it for 12. So I went to my wife and I said, hey, I think I've got to do this. And she said, I think you do. And as a family, we made the decision and jumped in, and it's been an incredible decision and absolutely the right one, given everything else that's happened since we decided to take the plunge.
Yeah, what a ride. And we talked about it a little bit earlier, but the Instacart scandal that came out a couple of weeks ago from the Consumer Reports, it's just I actually did a couple episodes on this because I had some questions from the listeners saying, "Hey, well, what are we doing about this like legally? Like legally there should be some issues here. Like why aren't things applying?" And then I did a whole bunch of research on different laws and how those laws came about and these acts that are close but don't necessarily apply.
Yep.
And overall, people were pretty upset about the situation with Instacart and the fact that, the same person in the same area is paying a different, or they're not the same people, but you know what I mean? Like the
Yep.
same person in a geographical area for the same product is paying different prices, either because of the desperation of how urgent they need that product, or how they potentially have a brand affinity with that product, so they know they'll pay a higher price.
Hmm.
All of that stuff really rubbed me the wrong way, and so just want to provide your perspective on the scandal and how that positions these type of solutions in the marketplace.
Yeah. So the idea of surge pricing, the idea of a sliding scale on pricing, that's not actually a new thing. And that's not actually on its own a problem, right? Surge pricing at JFK at 6 p.m. for your Uber makes sense, right?
Hmm.
Like
Agreed.
if you want that driver to go sit in traffic and wait for you, but taking an Uber home from JFK is a choice. And you could wait 10 minutes, or you could take the subway, or you could go stand in the taxi line. It's a choice. Feeding our families is not a choice. We have to feed our families. And the way in which the prices were being tested and manipulated, I think the phrase that was used was the shopper ceiling. How much would you be willing to overpay for something because of your, as you said, affinity for it, you've purchased it in the past, et cetera? It was just fascinating to see, even the way that they described it in the internal documents that came out in the consumer reports. And it's was possible because there isn't a source of truth in groceries. Like when I buy a flight, I'm from Texas originally. When I buy a flight home to Dallas, I am probably going to fly American Airlines because of the number of flights that they have from New York to Dallas every day. But I still start my purchasing trip on kayak.com because I want to make sure that American is pretty close to United or Delta, right? I'm not trying to fly Spirit, but if it's pretty close to United or Delta, like I'm gonna book American because I've got a little bit of status there, and maybe I'll get an upgrade or I'll have a larger seat because I'm a tall guy. When it comes to groceries, we drive to a store that we hope carries the products that are on our list. We look at the price that they have there and we're like, I don't know, is that how much this costs? Like maybe. For delivery, they were able to toggle it even more and have even less transparency around the prices that they were paying. Electronic shelf tags are starting to pop up in a lot of locations. That got struck down by the Supreme Court. Elizabeth Warren was all over it. And so, Bill Belichick said, if nobody's accusing you of cheating, then you're probably not trying hard enough. And I think that that's what is happening here, right? They've been given an inch and they're trying to take a mile. And I think it was last week, the week before, it was less than a month after this Consumer Reports, article came out. Instacart said that we've discontinued that part of the program, and they probably have. They said that they did, but also, if I wanted to find out if they had, where would I go to find that source of truth? And those are just some of the questions that we're asking at Stretch. I know a lot of people in the grocery industry. I know a lot of people work very, very hard to serve the shoppers, and it's not the grocery industry is bad. But they're being given a lot of pressure from investors, from their board, from the public markets to figure out how to squeeze as much revenue out of every trip to the grocery store as they can. And unfortunately, that disadvantages those that don't have the resources to be able to do the research, to be able to think about all the different ways that they could leverage their time or research to go and figure out what the best price is. And with Stretch, what our value proposition is you upload your grocery shopping list for this week to the Stretch app. We look at every store that's on our platform that's close by to you, and we tell you before you leave your house which grocery store has all the products that are on your list, and then what the total price for that whole entire shopping list is at each store. So it's $110 over here, it's $130 over here, it's $150 over there. The $150 option might be the closest option. So if you're in a rush, you might be willing to pay a little bit more to go to a store that's closer by. But at least right? At least similar to me with my American Airlines, at least I know I'm paying $50 more to fly American so that I can go to the terminal that I'm used to and, board in group 2. But I know that I pay that much, right? There's transparency around making that choice. And so ultimately, Stretch is about giving agency to shoppers so that they can make the best decision for them and their families this week.
Yeah, I think that's a fair and weighted opinion on the situation. And I think people understand surge pricing with Uber and these other type of ride sharing apps. And then people understand like supply and demand pricing. Like, hey, if I'm trying to fly this flight and it's near full, it's going to be more expensive. But I think the essence of trying to, I guess, maximize the ceiling of which the product may be offered at,
Mm-hmm.
varied by consumer preferences, is where transparency is important, because I think that there's enough transparency and background on how surge pricing or these other things work. Like it makes sense. But I think the main concern would be like there isn't enough transparency for you to know that this is even happening. And I think that's one of the main things is like, okay, maybe it's a company preference, and that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with a company charging more for bread in this at this store on or in their online portal, but it is also prudent and and important for the shopper to be aware of the choices that they're making so they can be
Mm-hmm.
informed.
Yeah, there's starting to be legislation around, understanding how those prices change and actually disclosing, was this price created by an algorithm, and even just that disclosure is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, disclosure, and then some of depends on like the state or which bill is in flight, but I know that there's some where there's some proposals of saying, okay, like you need to state how the algorithm uses AI pricing, and then how are you justifying that this is changing dynamically? Like, how
Mm-hmm.
are you justifying that? And then please provide the support for your decision in your pricing algorithm, which I think is many more steps more than just the label. But I think it's good that people are thinking about it and they find that it's important, like our representatives.
Yeah, well, and also just being able to understand, that you know if bread has a different price on different days of the week and different times of day, when is the best time to go? When is the worst time to go? Like for traffic. I worked at Waze, right? It was clear, right? You could say, hey, if I leave at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, or 4 o'clock to make this trip, like when am I going to have the best chance of avoiding traffic? Well, we could show you, right? And having some of that insight, so it's like, hey, it is going to cost you more if you go grocery shopping at 6 p.m. on Friday night. It just is. But if you're able to, if it's important to you to save money, then we recommend Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Cool. Let me know. Like, if you have to do that, there should be some way of me understanding how the system works, and that's not currently the case.
No, it's more black box for sure, which I know people are going to be less comfortable with it now, with just, I guess, the context and publicity and just the polarization of the two opposing viewpoints. But as you said, it's all about transparency, and that's what the Stretch app does. And I downloaded the Stretch app and I tried it out. I liked, like, when you're onboarded as a user, it asks you, hey, do you want to create your own list, or do you want to go with like our staple list? And so I went with the staple list because I was just trying out the app, and so I was like, okay, like let's just get started here.
Yeah.
And it walks you through, okay, here's your list, and if you want to add anything you can. And then the next step is like you put in your preference on the brand that which you're trying to shop with, and then you
Yeah.
come through like, okay, this is like kind of the milks that I typically like to buy, or these are the type of eggs I like to buy. And then after you do that, and I timed it took me about 4 minutes to go through like the initial onboarding, the sign up, and then the preference of the brands. And I guess it could have been a little bit faster, but I wasn't necessarily like overly focused. Like, okay, this is my whole life depends on this. So, but it took around like 4 minutes. And then after that, it populated my list, my shopping list across New York City, because I live in Manhattan. And it showed me the different stores to which I could save money. And so I did have a Target nearby, and there was many Targets displayed on the map that had the items that I was looking for. And then there was a Dollar General that I think was $15 cheaper, although it was missing like one of the egg or one of the items that I was looking for on my shopping list. And it lets me know, it's like, hey, like it is missing an item. Like this isn't the full list, but it is cheaper when you compare item to item. And then you can make that decision on what you want to do. For me, since I live in New York City and Andy does as well, is I don't have a car. I don't know if Andy, if you have a car, but I don't have a car. So for me, the distance is probably most important. And the
Yeah.
distance is worth like an extra $15, because for me to transport my goods from A to B in a backpack, like on the train, and bring them back to my house is more hassle than just walking to like my local Target or Trader Joe's.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we call that proximity pricing preference.
Yeah.
And you're right. In New York City, in Manhattan, I joke that if I ask people, how many blocks would you walk to save $20? Most people would be like, I wouldn't. Like people like their corner stores, and I think that eventually, we'll be able to have the type of coverage here in the city that will be a little bit more nuanced than we are right now. But the national coverage that we're starting with, was kind of as you mentioned, those big box, the Targets, the Dollar Generals, the Walmarts, the Krogers, the Aldis, and for most Americans, there's 4 or 5 grocery stores within the 3 mile radius of where they live. If you're kind of like near urban or suburban, and that's kind of where is kind of our jump off point, and I think that one thing, the new version of the app that's coming out, I think next week, allows you to, when you're going through that list of the brand preferences that you're looking for, if you don't care about a certain type of brand around, as you mentioned, like milk, right? If you're just like, just give me 2%, I don't really care if it's Borden or if it's Daisy Queen or whatever it is. We'll just say pick for me, and you'll just get the 2% milk. That's the best at whatever the store is. But then for other things, you really do have a preference when it comes to what type of soda you like, or what type of chips that you like, or what type of cereal you're going to go after. And
Mhm.
that's where Stretch gets smart every time that you use it to understand and kind of build your digital pantry, so that when we uncover or discover that there's something on sale that is typically in your pantry, in the future, we're going to be able to let you know that item or those items are on sale. And so continuing to not just be a reactive, but start to be a proactive partner for you in your grocery shopping. And that's where the personalization gets really fun. And it really builds that trust with the shoppers.
No, I agree. And I understand that New York City is not the target market to definitely to start with, given that there's just a lot of like bodegas and delis and
Yeah.
small grocery shops. Like there's not a Walmart superstore and a Costco, and there's a couple Aldis, but they're quite spread around, and they're not near me, unfortunately. I'd love to be near an Aldi, but I agree with you. And I like the personalization aspect of the app. And it's it's step one where you're able to personalize the app to the user, build a digital pantry, and provide that transparency. What do you think is the next step? You talked about your update and just providing additional value to the user. Where do you see Stretch going?
Yeah. So I think that when it's all said and done, Stretch exists to provide agency and choice. And being able to work with retailers, be able to work with brands, be able to work with delivery companies are all things that are on our roadmap. We've actually already had some incredible conversations with some of the top grocery stores and a few really exciting brands that I'm excited to announce partnerships with, hopefully in Q1. And when we think about what Stretch ultimately exists to do, is every time you think about going to the grocery store, we want you to open Stretch. right? Because the list building experience is something that takes place over the course of 3 or 4 days, right? You're adding things to your list, adding things to your list, adding things to your list, and they're like, all right, it's time to go to the store. The go to the store part, you click get recommendation, and it gives you your choices. This is what's closest to you. This is what's cheapest, and this is who can deliver it to you the fastest, right? Ultimately, that's the state, and you're going to make that decision based on what your priorities are that day, right? You might be in a rush. You might be having people coming over. You might have a full day and you just don't have time to get to the store and you're willing to pay the premium to have it delivered. But you're going to know what that premium is and you're going to be able to make a decision accordingly. You may say, hey, you know what? Like, I've got some time today. Like the kids are at school, the spouse is on a work trip. I'm going to drive a little bit further to save $50. No problem. But ultimately, that's where we want Stretch to be, is kind of like in a perfect world, in my dream of all dreams. Stretch is a lock screen app, right? That every time you think about the grocery, adding something to your grocery list, which most people do, like as I said, over the course of 3 or 4 days as they're planning their trip, you open it quickly, add it to the list, close it. Open quickly, add it to the list, close it. We're working on partnerships or platform builds with Siri and with Alexa. Those are on the roadmap, so people can just yell, "Hey Siri, add this to my Stretch list." We're also even looking at ChatGPT's App Store and potentially being a skill within some of the large language models. People think about recipes, and then after you get the recipe, then you have to turn it into a shopping list. Well, they're turning them into dumb shopping lists, right? The shopping lists are still just buy this item, but it's not attached to inventory, it's not attached to price. It's not going to actually. They're starting to do some delivery integrations, but that's for the privileged few who do delivery all of the time. Cool, no problem. But for everybody else, the other 90% of people who still go to the grocery store themselves, I think that there's a huge opportunity for us to be that partner for them.
No, the vision makes sense in the direction. And you mentioned about the shopping list and recipe integration potentially. I would love that. Like as somebody who looks at recipes all the time, it's such a pain in the butt to take the list of ingredients that you need and then buy them. If you're trying to shop for like many things, like I like it for my preference and workflow when it comes to cooking is I like to meal prep. So I'll pick out like a couple different recipes and typically I try to try something completely out of my wheelhouse and it either goes well or famously fails. And I'll take the ingredients list and I would love it to just be like, okay, like add to my Stretch shopping list. And then from there it has this pricing transparency, builds your list, your shopping list, and figures out where I should go to get those things. And whether or not they even have it in stock is also important because you go to places and they don't have your stuff. And I'm like, that kind of sucks. Like, especially in New York City, as I just moved here, is
Right.
that the stores don't necessarily have an expansive selection. And even if they do have an expansive selection, it doesn't necessarily mean that they carry what you're looking for. And so you can use their app, but sometimes the app, I don't, it's weird that sometimes the app isn't necessarily as up to date as like other things. Like I feel like sometimes a vendor, like a third party vendor, has better data on whether or not that item is there versus their app, which I find odd. I feel like if it's in house, they should have the best data, but who knows? I don't know how that all plays out. But what I'm saying is the item isn't always there for one, nor is it in stock. And so having an ability for the user just to like transfer that information into the app is like I would say golden. I've been looking for something like that consistently does it. I know there's apps that they have their own recipe and they want to be like like a kind of a recipe walled garden where you can add your recipe to their list and then you can like use Amazon or something like that. But it doesn't necessarily add the flexibility. Like I would love to be like, okay, can I order this? Can I get delivered? Can Amazon deliver it with their grocery subscription service, or is it better to just walk over and do what I need to do at Target or this various grocery store?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, there is a very fragmented industry, to say the least.
Mm,
There's a lot of little small solutions, and and if you've figured them out, right? If you've put in the time to like get your favorite recipe app customized to you. Eventually, it works the way that you want it to, but it's not connected to price. It's not connected to inventory, and a few of them are starting to be connected to like a delivery service. But again, most people, 90% of people still go to a grocery store. 80% shop in store, and then another 10% do curbside pickup. And for 90% of $1.8 trillion is a lot of groceries.
Yeah, and everybody needs to either go or get them delivered, or I mean, as you said, the majority of us go and get our groceries. So just having a way to understand what decision makes sense, and that's the quest that stretches on. Do you want to talk about a little bit on encouraging other founders or people in this headspace of like, hey, I want to start a company, like how to think about working towards or executing on what would be like a good hard quest or a good quest?
Yeah, I think the first question that I would ask when thinking about an idea that you have, right? Because ideas are so plentiful now, right? Like you can ask in your favorite LLM to come up with a startup idea, and it will do it for you, right? You can give
It'll tell
it
you
some
it's the best
constraints,
idea ever.
and it'll encourage you to jump off that cliff, and build your wings on the way down. Because ideas are no longer the barrier to entry. Everybody's got an idea. And you can generate as many as you want all day long for free, right? To decide to actually go and put time, effort, and resources towards an idea, the first question that I like to ask is it a multivitamin or is it a painkiller? And I'll tell you what I mean. When I left my house this morning to go to the office, I knew I was going to be talking to you, and I knew I had some investor calls immediately after. If on my way to the office this morning, I realized I didn't take my multivitamin, am I going to stop at CVS and buy a new jar of multivitamins to make sure I take my multivitamin before I begin my day? I'm not. I should have taken it this morning, but I forgot.
Hmm.
A lot of startups are multivitamins, where it's like, oh, that'd be cool. But if it doesn't exist, that's fine also. But if I have a headache that's preventing me from doing work, from having this conversation with you, from being able to give a good presentation to the investor I'm speaking with next, I am 100% running out and grabbing an Advil before I continue with the rest of my day. And thinking about the painkiller startup is what I think is a really good first litmus test of who's in pain, how much pain are they in, and what is a potential solution to that pain that could be created with the new paradigms that exist in the world today, with the new technologies that have been released, with the new ways of thinking about things. And I think that's, for me, is just a really good jump off point. There's a lot of really great efficiency apps that make my email better. But I personally am just not going to get out of bed in the morning for like building a more efficient email flow. Like that's just, it's fine. I'm glad somebody's passionate about it, but it's not me. And that's the other thing is when it's all said and done, like it has to be your thing. That like being a founder is crazy. Like no one should ever be a founder. Like it's nuts. It's the hardest thing that you will ever do. But when you're so driven nuts by the problem that you're trying to solve that it makes sense to become a founder to solve that problem, that's when you know you've found the right problem for you.
That was a perfect analogy about this is the first time I've heard that, the multivitamin, the painkiller. I've heard often like how much would people pay for it and what are their problems, but the painkiller and the vitamins like really black and white. It's like, okay, do you actually would you stop your day to alleviate yourself of pain or not? It's very straightforward on the direction of which you need to take yourself with the next part of your idea. And then you also talked about the 10-year problem, like if how long would you be willing to work on this, or how long would it take potentially for you to solve this problem, correct?
Yeah, and I think that's ultimately what you're signing up for. It was a conversation I had with with some investors, they're like, look, if you say yes to our term sheet, like you're saying yes to us for the next 7 years. And that's why you run a process, why you talk to as many people as you can. Like even if people, if you're working on a hard good problem, if you have a solution to somebody's painkiller, like you are someone's painkiller, you can raise money, right? There's a lot of people that are looking for the next opportunity, looking for the next deal. But when it's all said and done, like you really have got to be ready to like live it, breathe it, and then go, introduce it to other people and say, hey, leave your cushy job and come work on this with me. I'm going to pay you less than what they're paying you, but you get to work on this. And some people are going to be like, yeah, you're right. That's what I want to do. And, so it's, you have to be the one, who is grabbing onto that vision and then sharing it with others. And so if the idea is not that for you, then keep thinking about it. Keep waiting for that idea to pop up and present itself. But look for, a thing that I've told, young entrepreneurs to do in the past is write down everything that pisses you off for a month. Just a list. Like every time you get flustered, every time you get angry, every time it's like, oh man, just write it down. Like don't do anything with it. Just write it down and look to see if there's a theme that emerges around the things that you would want to build a painkiller for. And ask other people, like, what pissed you off this week? I was at a networking event recently, and that was like the opening question was like, hey everyone, let's go around the room and just share something that pissed you off this week. And it was really interesting how many people like, there's some commonalities to the things that pissed them off. And so we were like, oh, why has nobody built something to fix that? Right? It's not like, could you build it? It's that it has to be built.
Yeah, once again, that's a great perspective. I was thinking about a funny a funny part of, you got to convince somebody to jump ship and go to this super risky shop, because as of founding a company, it's not a sure gig for sure. And I was thinking, okay, like if you don't have a compelling problem, you're just maxed out on charisma. You just got ultimate riz going because you're trying to convince somebody to do something that's really not that compelling, but somehow convince them to do it. It's like, okay, well, you just made your hard problem even harder.
Exactly.
But no, lovely having you on the show, Andy, and appreciate the advice to young founders and founders, aspiring founders to be. If people wanted to get in contact with you or stretch and download the app or interact with you, what's the best way that they can do that?
Yeah. The website is stretchformore.com, stretch, FORMORE.com. And so that's where we've got our job listings. We've got the download links there. So you can reach out there. I am at Andy Elwood on every social platform. And I, for better or worse, read all of my DMs and reply to all of them. That's actually how I met my current co-founder. He cold DM'd me on LinkedIn, and it's been off to the races ever since. So, but I think that I'm a very curious person, and my assumption is that everybody that I interact with can teach me something. And I like to say that that perspective has increased my luck surface area, and opened up doors for me that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And so super grateful for anybody who's curious about what we're building, either from wanting to invest in it or wanting to join the team. But we're building here in New York City, and it's a really exciting time to be building in the grocery space, because a lot of people are talking about it, and they're going to keep talking about it throughout the next few years as we solve this problem.
Thank you so much, Andy, for being on the show. Of course, wherever you are in this world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Talk to you next week. Thank you.